You remember when this app was good. Not good in some vague, nostalgic way. Good in a specific way. It opened instantly. It showed you the thing you came for and nothing else. No ads, no algorithm deciding what you should see, no membership tier, no upsell, no modal begging you for 5 stars. And then, slowly, it changed. The feed stopped being chronological. The ads crept in, 1, then 4, then a wall of them. Features you never asked for buried the one feature you actually used. The app got heavier, slower, louder. It started fighting you. And here's the part that should bother you. This didn't happen to one app. It happened to almost all of them. The search engine that used to find things. The ride app that used to be cheap. The photo app that used to show you your friends. They all followed the exact same curve. Great, then good, then tolerable, then hostile. That is not a coincidence. That is not a string of bad CEOs making the same mistake. The decline wasn't a bug that crept in over time. It was written into the company's cap table before you ever installed it. Because here's the truth nobody says out loud. Good software has an expiration date. And the date isn't set by engineers or by users or by competition. It's set by math. The math of venture capital. Let me show you the equation. To understand why your apps get worse, you have to stop thinking about software and start thinking about a portfolio. A venture fund doesn't invest in one company. It invests in maybe 50, maybe 100. And the brutal reality of that portfolio is this. Most of them fail. According to data from Correlation Ventures, across more than 21,000 deals, and this is roughly the shape of the whole industry, about 65% of venture deals return less money than was put into them. Most bets don't just disappoint, they lose money. So how does the fund make money? Not from the average, from the outlier. Around 4% of deals, 4 in 100, return more than 10 times the capital invested. And it's those few that have to pay for everything else. One enormous winner covers 9 total losses, and then some. This is called a power law. And once you understand it, the behavior of every startup you've ever used suddenly makes sense. Because if you're an investor whose entire model depends on finding the one company that returns 100 times your money, you cannot accept a company that just returns 5 times. A 5x company is, in this math, almost the same as a 0. It can't carry the fund. It can't pay for the strikeouts. So picture a founder who builds something genuinely useful. Their app makes $1 million a year, serving a loyal group of people who love it. By any normal definition of a business, that is a success. They're profitable. They're sustainable. People are happy. To a venture fund, that company is a failure. Not because it's badly run, because it stopped growing. A $1 million business that can't credibly become a $1 billion business doesn't belong in the portfolio. It's a wasted slot. And that single distinction between a business that's profitable and a business that's infinitely scalable is the seed of everything that goes wrong next. Because the moment a company takes that money, it signs up for a destination most software simply cannot reach without breaking the thing that made it good. Useful is not the goal. Infinite is the goal. Hold on to that. It explains the next 3 years of the app's life. Now here's the strange part. If the endgame is to squeeze you, why does every one of these apps start out so generous? Free, or nearly free. No ads. Fast. Beautiful. Support that actually answers. Prices that don't make sense. Rides cheaper than a bus. Deliveries with no fee. Storage that's basically infinite. A service that clearly costs more to run than it charges. That generosity isn't kindness. It's a weapon. And it's being paid for with the venture capital we just talked about. This is the subsidy phase, the honeymoon. The company is taking the investor's money and using it to make the product artificially, unsustainably good on purpose. And it has one goal: capture the market before anyone notices what the real price is going to be. Think about what cheap rides actually did. They didn't just win customers. They trained an entire city to stop calling taxis. They made the old option feel obsolete. The low price was never the business model. It was the down payment on a habit. And while you were enjoying the deal, the subsidy was doing a second job. It was burning the competition alive. A smaller rival, one that actually has to make money on every transaction, cannot match a company that's happy to lose $1 on every sale for 5 straight years. The well-funded startup isn't trying to out-earn its competitors. It's trying to outlast them, to keep bleeding money longer than anyone else can survive. That's not competition. That's a siege paid for in venture dollars. This is the Trojan horse. The free, frictionless, wonderful product is the beautiful gift wheeled up to your gate. You roll it inside because, honestly, why wouldn't you? It's better than everything else and it costs nothing. But the gift was never the point. The gift is the delivery mechanism. And once you're inside, once the taxis are gone, once your photos and your friends and your work all live in there, once switching would cost you more than staying, the soldiers climb out. Because the subsidy was always temporary. Venture money is not patient capital. It comes with a clock. And when that clock runs out, the entire logic of the product flips. Remember, this was all written into the contract before you ever open the app. We're about to watch the contract come due. The honeymoon ends the day the money asks to get paid back. And it always asks. There's a name for what happens next. The writer Cory Doctorow coined it in 2022, and it's blunt on purpose. He called it Enshittification. The word was so precise and described the thing so well that it became the American Dialect Society's Word of the Year in 2023. He's since turned it into a whole book, which tells you something about how far the pattern has spread. And he described it as a predictable 3-stage life cycle that platforms move through, not by accident, but by financial gravity. Stage 1. The platform is good to its users. That's the honeymoon we just watched. It pours value onto you to lock you in. Stage 2. Once you're locked in, it stops serving you and starts serving its business customers, the advertisers, the sellers, the people who pay to reach you. Your experience gets a little worse, so theirs can get better. The search results that used to answer your question now sit underneath a stack of ads. The feed that used to show you your friends now shows you whatever someone paid to put in front of you. Stage 3. Once the business customers are locked in too, the platform turns on them as well and claws back all the value for itself, for its shareholders. This is the IPO phase, the public markets phase, the we promised infinite growth and now we have to deliver it phase. And there's nothing left to give. There's only taking. Watch the shape of it. Value flows to users, then value is taken from users and given to business. Then value is taken from everyone and handed to the shareholders. The same platform, the same code, the same logo, pointed at a different beneficiary each time. Now think about the apps you actually use, without naming a single one. Start with the ride. $4 during the subsidy years. The subsidy ended, and the same trip is now 11, 14, 18. The price didn't rise because the world got expensive. It rose because the company finally has to make the math work, and you're the one standing where the money has to come from. Then the photo app that opened to your friends. Now it opens to a feed of suggested content, of strangers, of things designed to keep you scrolling past the people you actually came to see, because your attention is the inventory now, and your friends don't pay. And the search box. Do you remember when you typed a question and the first result was the answer? Try it right now. Count the ads before the first organic result. I'll wait. That gap between the answer you wanted and the answer that's profitable isn't an accident. The ad is what makes money. The answer is what costs money. Now let me show you the whole thing in one set of numbers. Consider what happened to the ad revenue in the same years that users started complaining about the results. Ad revenue went up, every year without exception. And in those same years, something else moved in the opposite direction, not the survey scores, which companies know how to manage. Usage. The number of searches per person dropped nearly 20% in a single year. The share of queries that end without anyone clicking anything climbed past half. The market share that used to be so dominant it defined the word search quietly began to slip. The revenue kept climbing. The reliance slowly didn't. One number going up, one number going down, same product, same company, two entirely different answers to how is it doing, depending on which side of the transaction you're standing on. None of this is incompetence. Every one of these decisions makes the number go up next quarter. The product getting worse for you is the same event as the product getting better for the shareholder. They are not two things. They are one thing seen from two sides of the cap table. And this is where the loop closes, the thing I told you at the start. The decline you've been blaming on bad management, on greed, on some CEO who lost the plot? It wasn't a decision made last quarter. It was stamped onto the company the day they took the money. The expiration date was printed on the term sheet. Every founder who raises a fund this large is, whether they admit it or not, promising the same thing. That one day this product will turn on the very people it was built to delight. Because that's the only way the math ever closes. You didn't lose a good app. You watched a contract come due. So is there a way out? There is. And I'll tell you up front, it's not a solution. It's a philosophy and a small one, almost defiantly small. Some builders have decided to opt out of the machine entirely, not raise venture money, not promise infinite growth, charge you honestly. Some people call it small tech, and the idea is almost boring in its simplicity. Build software that's allowed to just be a good business, profitable, sustainable, useful, and finished. Not a rocket aimed at $1 billion exit, a craft. You can usually find them because they have something every venture-backed app quietly removes, a price on the homepage. They charge you money, honestly. A one-time payment or a fair subscription that buys a real thing instead of a free product where the price is hidden deferred, and paid later in your attention, your data, and your slowly degrading experience. When you pay for the product, you are the customer. When the product is free, you are the inventory. That's the whole mechanism. One sentence. It decides everything downstream. But let's be honest about the scale of it. These small, honest businesses are not the ones that dominate your phone, because the entire financial machine of the industry is built to fund the other kind. The ones that have to grow forever, the ones with the expiration date. And so the pattern repeats. As long as the definition of success is perpetual, exponential growth, and not whether a tool is actually useful to the people who use it, your favorite apps will keep getting worse. Not because the engineers got worse. Not because the founders lost their way. Because the clock they wound up on day one, the one that was ticking while you were enjoying the free ride, just ran out. The math never changed. You just stopped being the beneficiary. Here's the uncomfortable thought to leave you with. Everything you just watched, the subsidy, the lock-in, the inevitable turn toward extraction, runs on one fuel, the belief that you can grow forever, that the next round will always be bigger, that the math eventually closes. Right now, that exact same logic is being poured at a scale we've never seen into the one sector that's promised to change everything. The same grow-at-all-costs engine, the same investors needing a 100x return, the same clock ticking on subsidized products that feel free today, and it may be building the most dangerous bubble of them all. If you want to see where this story goes when you multiply it by $1 trillion, watch this next on why AI is a financial black hole.